Sydney. I'm a first year in the School of Computer Science, and my project is about becoming a sphere. Now, I first came up with this idea about a year ago, and it was during a time where I was questioning the nature of human empathy. And what I saw was that there was a distance between people, between myself and others, between other people, even between friends or family. And it's the kind of distance that makes it hard for one person to understand another. And it really struck me how common this distance was. And I think to some degree, this is something that most of us, if not all of us, experience. And we try to overcome this distance by understanding each other better, by telling stories about being human, and by listening to these stories. But there's a part of the human experience that goes beyond just being human, and that's the fact that we exist at all. It's the fact that we have a body, we are a body, and that we have a will, and that we understand ourselves, each other, and the world itself. So I was thinking about how I could tell this story about existing, because I don't feel like it's a story that's told very much about being human. And in thinking about how to do this, my first idea was that what if an observer could interact or empathize with being with other things, the simplest form of existence, the sphere. And then my idea became, what if the person was that simplest thing? What if they were a sphere? And this raised so many interesting questions for me, such as what would empathy be like if we extended who or what we cared about? And I thought about the kinds of relationships or interactions that would result. And so the first relationship that I thought of was peer-to-peer, so a sphere interacting with a lot of other spheres. In the same way that each of us thinks of our friends or our family. And the other type of relationship I thought of was containment, so a sphere within another sphere, so that the smaller sphere would view the larger one as its world, and the larger one would view the smaller one as a part of itself. And so as these spheres move with their will, and as they change their relationships, they also have different interactions with one another. So to show what I mean by this, consider that you are the gray sphere, and that first that you see that there's a sphere in front of you, and that you're about to go in. And that sphere says come, because it's inviting you to become a part of its world. And when you leave, it says you, because your existence is now separate from its own existence. And then imagine that there's a smaller sphere that goes within inside of you, and it says in, because it wants to become a part of your existence. And when it leaves, it says me, because its existence is now separate from yours. So it's really amazing to me the power that code has in expressing our imagination. I created all the spheres from a class, and to convey the relationship, I had a tree that sort of changed through like a state machine. So to show what I mean, I'll take the diagonal case. It's basically what happens when the following. So let me introduce the players first. You have you, which is the gray sphere. You're in your old world. That's the red sphere. There's a new world, which is the sphere that you might enter. And then the root is a temporary universe of the sphere system. And so what happens is this you starts by being the child of the red sphere, which is your old world. And you express a desire to change the world that you're in. And once that desire is fulfilled, you become part of the blue world. Okay, so I'm very grateful to have had the opportunity to actually have made all of these ideas into something tangible. And for that, I would like to thank Dr. Golan Levin and the Surge Office and the Studio for Creative Inquiry. So basically what I did was I created an experience from my imagination and turned it into something that a person could actually experience with their entire body. And to do this, I had a huge ball, so it's about 3 meters in diameter on the outside, 2 meters in diameter on the inside, and a person is strapped inside the ball. so that when the ball moves, the person moves along with it. And that forms sort of like the tactile experience that the person has, that they have a new body. But there's also another part to the experience, which is the audiovisual experience. And it's basically what the person is seeing is that they're seeing all the spheres that they're interacting with. And they have this Daydream headset, which conveys the experience through a Unity experience. So in order to integrate these different senses together, both the tactile and the audiovisual, there's an orientation unit. And so you can see the person here, they're strapped inside. They're also wearing the Daydream, and opposite them within the ball is the orientation unit. So it's placed there inside the blue outline. And as the ball moves, the orientation unit picks up the orientation, and it tells the virtual reality that the person is seeing how they should be seeing the world. So being another form isn't just about the body you have or what you see. It's also about the fact that you can change the world around you, about having a sense of free will. So I thought that was very important that the viewer had that kind of experience. And so to do that, I gave them a controller so that they can indicate whether they wanted to go forward, backward, left, or right. And outside of the ball, there would be pushers that would push the ball according to how the person wanted to move. But pushing the ball isn't just a matter of which direction you want to go in. It's also a matter of the person's frame of reference relative to the pushers or within the room. And so there was one person designated at the corner, Pormita, who actually had a phone. And so what she would do is she would take in these different considerations, the controller input and the orientation, and she would tell the pushers how to move properly. So the way the signaling works is like this. You have the orientation unit, which is made of three things: an accelerometer, an Arduino, and an HC06, which sends the Bluetooth signal of the orientation to the Unity in the virtual reality, and that changes the camera's orientation. And so the coordinator looks at the bottom left screen, which has 3 white circles. So the top white circle is what they use to actually tell the pushers how to move. So if the green indicator was above the end, the pushers would push from the northern direction. And this takes in input from both the controller as well as the camera orientation, which is done through UDP. So now I have a video that basically shows all these parts together. It shows the person rolling and coordinating with the people outside of them, and it shows how their view changes as they move. Okay, cool. Oh well. So unfortunately, the sound didn't work, but what should have happened was that at a certain moment in time, when you saw that big circle, that like sudden flash, the other ball that you were interacting with said you. So that was actually when you were changing worlds. And this basically concludes my presentation about sharing the experience of existence through being a sphere. Thank you. Yes.
You use a sphere then as your metaphor for
Existing.
individual.
Uh-huh.
Would it make a difference if you used any regular closed solid other than a sphere?
I chose,
say
yeah.
a cube.
Okay. I chose the sphere in particular because what I actually originally imagined was sort of like a point. And I think that the sphere is sort of like the best way that we as humans can understand a point. Because a point is literally the simplest thing that can exist.
Well, it's one dimension.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's zero-dimensional, yeah.
So a circle, I mean, a sphere is a metaphor for a point, and the psychology you're talking about is individuals as
just existing.
different in that they're not overlapping other points?
So, okay, in conveying the sense of empathy between the spheres, the ability to actually have that kind of intersection. So it was kind of like it was a point, but its influence could spread outward. So to convey that in a more concrete way, I thought the sphere was the most appropriate form to convey both that sense of intersection and that sense of simplicity. Yeah. Yes, go on.
Cindy, congratulations. This is a very ambitious project for anyone actually, let alone a first-year undergraduate. I'm curious if you could share any sort of qualitative anecdotes from the experiences of the participants who actually entered into the sphere world.
Okay, so there were several people that actually went inside the ball. My friend Maya, Sophia, who was in our class, and in a more physical sense, I think they were comfortable in that the straps were properly and so on. And there was also this really interesting thing where if you're inside the ball, you also kind of have this feeling of like rebirth, because it almost feels like a womb. It's like you're becoming a new form, and I feel like that experience really conveys that. So that's a more qualitative experience that I also kind of observed because I was in the ball somewhat too. Yes?
I actually have 2 questions.
Yes, okay.
So one is just a question about your method. What did you draw on, beyond sort of obviously a great deal of reflection that you did to think through this, what did you draw on to conceptualize and execute this? Like what research did you do for it? And then the other question actually is about what you said. So when you had the image of the dots, the blue and the red. And
Yes, okay.
Moving, wouldn't the child of the one dot that was part of that sphere, maybe in a way, or related to that sphere, bring some of that to its new relationship? So it wouldn't be kind of a severing of its former relationship and a making of a new one.
Okay.
It would almost like move through and bring some of that old relationship into the new one, wouldn't it? Rather than just splitting between all of those pieces.
Yeah, so actually what happens is it's the relationship in a more like, because I wanted to sort of also concretize the relationship and make it like, in a way like less fluid and more like concrete, because I just wanted to be as simple as possible. And so that kind of relationship was more based on where the center of the sphere was. So usually that can only be in one place. It can only be in one sphere or another. So that was usually pretty a concrete thing. But but even in the more metaphorical sense, I wanted the sense of relationship to be more simple and more about existing and less about like a fluid nature and the kind of complex behavior that often surrounds being human or having emotion.
And then the research question.
Oh yes, the research question. So most of this was actually like what I came up with, but I did do some research on actually consciousness a while back, and I found it really interesting, and it kind of inspired me to kind of abstract what existence or being or consciousness was. And I realized that most papers on consciousness were about biology or neurology or philosophy, but usually in a human sense. And I found a few papers that actually talked about consciousness in a more mathematical way. They actually thought about it in a way that didn't have to involve humans at all. And I thought that was really interesting, really inspiring. And I thought about how we could kind of take that and think about a part of our existence as human or anything into something that's more concrete.
Cut off there. Cindy,
Okay.
great work.
Thank you.